The Nintendo Switch 2 has arrived, bringing in a whole new 4K generation of Nintendo. I've spent the past few days playing this new system and enjoying its solid lineup of launch titles, and of course I have a lot of thoughts. This will just be some quick initial impressions, as it's still way too early to come to any conclusions or review it properly. It's been over 8 years since the original Switch launched, so finally getting a more powerful Nintendo console feels like a huge breath of fresh air. The system itself feels a lot more high quality too, with larger Joy-Cons and a bigger screen that make handheld mode more impressive, and the 1080p screen looks great despite not being an OLED. The new way the Joy-Cons connect to the system using magnets is super cool, and feels way more stable and reliable than the sliding lock system of the first Switch. And the premium finish on the outside of the console is a nice touch. It really is just a bigger and better Switch, and in terms of the hardware I think they've basically perfected the original with this second iteration, as long as the Joy-Cons don't start drifting, that is. $450 is a steep price, but at least it does feel like a very high quality product. It reminds me of how the Wii U felt like an extra fancy Wii, or the jump from the DS to the 3DS. I really enjoy these sorts of sequel consoles that focus on refining a previously great experience to be the best it can be. Right off the bat I got a pretty positive initial impression of the Switch 2 since there's actually some system music that plays during your first time setting it up. It's a long way from being a full console soundtrack, but it's a nice extra bit of effort that made my first moments with this system feel just a bit more special. If only this played when using the settings instead of just being a one-time thing. Another small bit of personality is that when you wake the console from sleep it makes this sound. Which of course is a pretty tiny detail, but it's still one I appreciate anyways. That's not to say I think this console is perfect though, as the safe and familiar menus are pretty lame. The new sound effects are fun, but it's still way too similar to the first Switch. Both the 3DS and the Wii U had entirely new interfaces that made them stand out with useful apps like an activity log. And while I'm warming up to the fact that this is just a straightforward upgrade over the original, I still would have preferred a fun new direction with the UI instead of them just rounding the corners and not much else. And in the case of the Mii Maker, they pretty much just flipped it and called it a day, which is disappointing. They could always add themes later down the road, but I just wrapped up 8 years of wishing for that, so I'm not getting my hopes up this time. It's not that big of a deal as the games themselves are obviously where the majority of the enjoyment of a gaming console comes from, but the boring user interface is probably my biggest critique of the Switch 2 so far. I've used Game Chat a few times, and while it is more intuitive and useful than I was expecting, I'm still not sure how much I'll actually end up using it over the console's lifespan. But it's a decently fun way to chat with friends natively on the system without having to set anything up. It's no Miiverse, but it's fun to see Nintendo prioritizing community features like this again. But this is what the microphone sounds like when hooked up to the TV, so it's not exactly ideal in terms of quality. But thankfully you can connect an external microphone and just use that instead. I think the real test will be how much I use this feature once a new Animal Crossing game arrives, as that seems like a match made in heaven. I also ended up getting the new Switch 2 Pro controller, and it's a super smooth new version of the previous one. While this genuinely might be my new favorite video game controller ever, it's by no means a necessary purchase to get the most out of your Switch 2. But I'm still glad I got one as I've been really enjoying using it. Seeing Nintendo games running at 4K 60fps is unreal. I feel like this might be the last big noticeable resolution upgrade for a Nintendo console. Going to HD with the Wii U still felt like a much bigger jump, but this is definitely still a huge improvement that makes a big difference. It'll be tough to impress me with raw pixel counts again though, as I think 4K is about as crystal clear as you reasonably need. Of course Mario Kart looks fantastic, but I've also been really enjoying playing older games that now look better than ever. Breath of the Wild running in a smooth 4K 60 is a sight to behold, and games like Echoes of Wisdom that had rough frame rates previously now look and play a lot better. In general, I'm not much of a graphics-focused person, but in the past few years the limits of the original Switch were becoming extremely noticeable. The fact that the Switch 2 is able to rival my PS5 in terms of resolution and frame rates while still being a handheld console is pretty much everything I wanted from it. I can't wait to see what the next big 3D Zelda and Mario games will look like with this level of power available to the developers. The increase in power also means the eShop finally runs well, which is a fantastic upgrade that hugely improves the experience of using the console. Not only does it load quickly, it's also a better layout this time around. Your wishlist has a dedicated spot on the right now, and you can sort it by which games are currently on sale, which is a great new quality of life feature. It's a bit disappointing to watch the sea of shovelware transfer over to this new, sleeker eShop, but I guess that's the price of backwards compatibility. This new eShop isn't as good as the storefronts on 3DS and Wii U were, but it's still a big upgrade. Although you could argue that the bar was set so low with the first Switch that anything would be considered an improvement at this point. One aspect of this new generation that I really don't like are game keycards. They didn't scare me too much at first as they just seemed like a replacement for the code-in-a-box games that already existed on Switch 1, but the surprising part has been just how widespread they are so far. Out of the 14 launch titles that got a physical release in North America, only 5 of them are actually on the card itself and don't require a download to play, with only 2 of those being third-party. This is hugely concerning to me, as someone who tries to buy all my games physically. To me, game keycards seem like they have all the downsides of both physical and digital games at the same time, and personally I'm planning to avoid buying any of them for the entire generation. I'm sure first-party Nintendo games will still be on the card like usual, which will make up the majority of my library anyways, but it's disappointing to see the third-party lineup affected by such a big issue like this. New consoles always have a fairly limited lineup of games to play at launch, but the Switch 2 has managed to have a whole bunch of games that I've really been enjoying. But I completely understand why these games wouldn't be enough to justify an early console purchase for most people, especially with these high prices. Of course, the big, exciting, and expensive launch title for the Switch 2 is Mario Kart World. As one of Nintendo's best-selling franchises that appeals to a huge audience, it's a pretty great way to kick things off for the Switch 2. Mario Kart 8 is an 11-year-old game at this point, so it's really refreshing to play a new one after it's been so long. Actually having new mechanics to get used to like the trick system and increased movement options has been so much fun, and the course designs and soundtrack are as incredible as ever. The remixes of older Mario songs that play during free roam are particularly impressive, and I've consistently had to stop playing just to listen to the music. My only problem is that there's no built-in music player, and I'd even take just a basic pop-up in the bottom corner that tells you the title of the song that's playing. But this is already one of my favorite Nintendo soundtracks of all time, as the sheer quantity and quality of music from the past and present is truly impressive. The gameplay itself is an absolute blast, with improved character animations that make the Mario cast feel even more alive than ever before. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the race structure where you drive on the roads in between the courses, as only getting to do one lap on the tracks themselves feels pretty awkward. Thankfully, you can still play the courses like normal with 3 laps in versus mode and online with friends, but it seems like the priority is on these new connected versions of the courses. But I can understand the desire to do something new and different after 8 Deluxe perfected the old formula, so I'm okay with them experimenting in this way even if it's not perfect. Plus, the connected world leads to the best new mode, Knockout Tour. This is where the big open world shines the most, as it's a mad dash to the end with no breaks or loading screens at all that couldn't have been done in any previous Mario Kart. And the F-Zero style elimination structure makes it more high stakes than your average Mario Kart race. Then there's Free Roam, which acts as a great lobby system to chill out with in between races or just aimlessly wander around in single player. Don't expect a full open world full of content and meaningful rewards though, as that's not what this is at all. The P-Switch missions and hidden collectibles are fun and give you something to head towards while exploring, but they just give you stickers as rewards, which isn't super motivating. Despite that, I've still spent a lot of time in Free Roam, mostly because of the stellar soundtrack and gorgeous skyboxes. I've always enjoyed just exploring locations in video games for no real reason. I guess I just find it relaxing. It's a nice low-stakes playground for you to mess around in, which I appreciate. Around the map you can find these glowing bags of food which unlock new costumes for the drivers, which is kind of a strange way to handle the outfits. It's a nice way to encourage you to play as different characters in order to unlock their alternate versions, but when combined with the way you unlock new characters through the Kamek item, it all feels a bit weird. The character select screen is a bit of a nightmare as well. I have no idea why they didn't just make the different costumes a selectable option for each driver instead of having them all count as separate characters. Overall though, Mario Kart World is a fantastic new bold entry in the series that takes a lot of big swings. Not everything lands perfectly and I think it might end up being a somewhat divisive game, but it's exciting to play a Mario Kart game with this much scale and ambition. There's about 1,000 other things I could talk about, including the incredible new version of Rainbow Road that totally blew my mind, but I want to move on to other games before I go on for too long. As the big headlining launch title, this game lives up to the task for me and made this whole console launch feel really exciting and fun, and I'm sure I'll keep coming back to this game for years to come, although it isn't on the same level as Breath of the Wild was in 2017 for me. And if you're not a big Mario Kart fan, I can totally see this not being enough to sell you on the system. In my opinion, the second best new exclusive Switch 2 game is Fast Fusion. This futuristic high-speed racing game is a great deal at just $15, and it's been a really fun companion to Mario Kart since it focuses on pure speed and precision as you learn the best routes on each course. It looks and runs incredibly well, which isn't a surprise for a new Shinin title. It's such a satisfying game to get good at, and I've really enjoyed my time with it so far. It might not be a full new F-Zero game, but it's basically the next best thing. Speaking of F-Zero, I've also spent some time with the GameCube games that have been added to Switch Online. GX has been my main focus, which of course is a fantastic game and it's so great to see it get some official recognition like this. And Wind Waker looks nice and sharp as well, although I probably still prefer the HD version on Wii U myself. With a big list of GameCube games on the way, I finally feel like the expansion pack is worth the money as these games hold up really well. It's a very limited selection right now, but once more games are added, it'll end up being a really great addition to the console's overall value. I'm excited to play games like Chibi Robo, Path of Radiance, and maybe even the original Animal Crossing since I haven't played them yet. Although it's not a Switch 2 exclusive, the game I've probably been enjoying the most aside from Mario Kart is Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time. I just recently became a fan of the 3DS original, and this sequel has really been pulling me in. It's a charming RPG life sim with an addicting gameplay loop and great music, and I can already tell it's going to be one of my personal favorite games of the year. It actually released a few weeks ago, but I purposefully waited to play it on Switch 2 so I could enjoy it at 4K 60fps. This game doesn't exactly have an amazing story or anything, but the amount of customization and the surprisingly solid combat make it really enjoyable. I've also been slowly working my way through Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4, which has been delightful. The jokes, music, and narrative are all terrific, and it's been a great change of pace since this game is unlike anything else. Toby Fox wasn't joking when he said that Chapter 3 was going to be unusual. I don't want to spoil too many of its best moments, plus I haven't even finished Chapter 4 myself yet, but Deltarune is shaping up to be one of the all-time greats. Alright, it's time for me to admit something. I actually kind of like Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. I mean, it's basically just a system tutorial full of tech demos and basic minigames, but I surprisingly ended up kind of enjoying it. Should it have been a paid $10 game? Of course not. The fact that I'm sort of fond of this game just makes me wish it was a free pack-in title even more, so it wouldn't have this extra level of expectations attached to it since Nintendo decided it was good enough to charge for. It honestly feels like the developers who made it were planning on it being included with every system, since it really is a tour of all the hard work and designing that went into making the Switch 2 work. It also does a great job at showing off this console's new unique features like mouse mode. Speaking of mouse controls, I think there's a lot of potential with this new control method. It has yet to be used in a super interesting way in a big new title, but they work really well and I'm excited to see how they get used in the future. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should go out and buy Welcome Tour, but I had a fun time with it despite it not being anything too special, and at the very least it's much better than 1-2 Switch as a more casual launch title. The constant facts and quizzes were a bit much though. I know there are probably hundreds of other Switch 2 impressions videos out there, but I still wanted to share my thoughts since a new generation of Nintendo doesn't come around every day. It's sort of funny that 3 of the launch titles I've been enjoying are racing games, but luckily I'm a big fan of this genre so I'm having a lot of fun. Mario Kart is a joy to play, and it feels like a huge celebration of Mario as a whole. Fast Fusion and Fantasy Life are fantastic as well, and seeing older Switch games running at such high resolutions and frame rates is so great. The Switch 2 has a whole lot of problems like high pricing and the prevalence of game keycards, but I'd still say this launch has been pretty fun for me despite it all. But of course I'm going to feel relatively positive about a new console right after its launch due to the pure excitement and hype. So we'll see how I end up feeling about it after a few years have passed. And if you're not buying the Switch 2 anytime soon due to a variety of reasons or factors, please don't let my ramblings make you feel like you're missing out on too much. Believe it or not, there are just a few things that are more important than video games. I'm excited to keep making videos over the course of this new generation, and I hope you'll stick around to see where this channel goes in the next few years. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go get absolutely destroyed in Mario Kart Online.